All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for that introduction. Today, we're going to be talking about how we're restoring northern bobwhite to Pennsylvania. Just for a little background, northern bobwhite are non-migratory game bird native to Pennsylvania. Their populations have been declining throughout their geographic range, probably since at least the 1960s, primarily due to habitat loss and fragmentation. Pennsylvania is no exception to that. They were once found in all 67 counties across the state. So bobwhite have been declining throughout their geographic range, probably since at least the 1960s, and that's due to habitat loss and fragmentation. Pennsylvania is no exception to that. Bobwhite were once found in all 67 counties across the state, thriving in the idle farm fields and hedgerows created by early settlers, but they've since been extirpated, sometime likely in the 1990s and early 2000s. The loss of bobwhite is sad because it's a reminder of the decline in the longstanding hunting traditions that we have here in Pennsylvania and the shrinking grassland and shrub habitats that are vital for not only bobwhite, but for a variety of species. So this extirpated status was the impetus for a new plan to restore bobwhite and the grassland habitats that they depend on. So after significant habitat restoration dating back to 2017, we successfully returned the bobwhite to the Keystone State last year. So how did we do it? Well, finding the right place for bobwhite reintroduction is vital to the success of the project. Luckily, Letterkenny Army Depot became our first major partner. So this chunk of public land, about 2,600 acres, now coined the Bobwhite Quail focus area, hits all the criteria needed for translocation. 1,500 acres of contiguous managed land, no quail hunting or pen-reared releases in the vicinity, relatively mild winters, and resources to manage that habitat. Additionally, we also partnered with Quail Forever, which provides technical assistance and the boots on the ground management needed to make this happen. So to manage habitat for bobwhite, we need to key in on a few essential components. Native warm season bunch grasses like little and big bluestem, which provide ideal nesting cover. Bobwhite are prolific breeders, so an abundance of nesting cover is important for reproduction. Secondly, a diverse mix of forbs and legumes to attract insects for chicks and to provide natural forage throughout the seasons. And last, low-growing shrubs like rubus, plum, dogwood that provide protective cover from predators and the elements. So combined, these habitat components create a diverse habitat mosaic, which can be challenging to maintain because frequent disturbance is necessary. Managing for bobwhite at this site was a large undertaking, and this is where the technical assistance of Letterkenny staff and Quail Forever really came into play. So prescribed burning is arguably the single most effective and cost-efficient method for management of bobwhites, and that's why over 3,500 acres have been burned. Generally, fire is applied to promote warm season grasses and combat woody recursion on a return interval anywhere from 1 to 3 years to meet habitat goals prior to translocation of the birds. Additionally, herbicide was applied to over 2,000 acres to combat invasives, cool season grasses, and woody growth. So at Letterkenny, a few of our major contenders are black locust, autumn olive, fescue. So not all invasive, some are natural, but invasive in their nature. So another tool was overstory removal. We thinned a woodland to create an oak hickory savanna. So this allowed sunlight to the ground where we use prescribed fire to prevent woodies and thatch buildup and promote grasses and forbs. Other mechanical treatments we use are brush hogging, roller chopping, all to reduce woodies. We also use disking to promote growth of forbs and control grasses. And that's been used on over 300 acres, where we have also planted native forbs and grasses, and dogwood shrubs have also been installed. Disking and fire are typically used in conjunction to maintain a 3-year fire or a 3-year disturbance rotation. So here's an example of part of the focal area before management. This is 2 years after clearing trees, removing invasives, and burning. And this is about 1.5 years later. You can see this beautiful mosaic of shrubs, grasses, and forbs, which is ideal for bobwhite habitat. So after over 5 years of site preparation, the Letterkenny Bobwhite Quail focus area was finally ready for its first translocation, and that occurred in March of 2024. So we translocated 87 birds sourced from our partners in Fort Knox, Kentucky, Fort Barfoot, and the Department of Wildlife Resources in Virginia, and Tall Timbers Research Station. Birds were trapped and either immediately driven or flown to Letterkenny for release. Following release, we did a few surveys in the focal area. Whistle counts, they occur in spring, and it's just an index on singing males. We heard multiple males singing at multiple points, meaning that not only did they survive the first few months, but they are also engaging in breeding behavior. Also, we heard a variety of songbirds that use different components of the habitat mosaic, which highlights the establishment of diverse habitat structure at Letterkenny. During fall covey counts, for those unfamiliar with what a covey is, it's when a group of bobwhite group up after the breeding period for warmth and protection, and they call to each other to establish community. So during peak calling activity, which is in October, we heard 8 coveys. Now, calling is density dependent for bobwhite. So because their densities are low, we probably didn't hear all of the bobwhite present. But even with a conservative 8, that indicated once again that they're surviving and that they had reproductive success over the breeding period. And this is quite promising because their survival tends to be very, very low after translocation. So moving forward, we're going to continue with active management to promote a habitat mosaic needed for another successful year, but with some restrictions. Because we're going to have birds on the ground, we have to reduce the burn season. So burning has to conclude by mid-April because that's when early nesting starts. And then also, ideally, you want your burn patches to be under 50 acres, which I know that can be challenging. But this is all to, we want to keep it low to maintain that habitat mosaic. So all of their resources are within reach of each other. Translocations are going to occur again this coming March, and then again in 2026. We'll be trying to reach our goal of 100 birds on this next round. And then also this year, we're going to have a subset of birds with transmitters on them. That way we can track their survival and reproduction to kind of tell the story a little bit better for the next time we talk about it. I'm going to hand it over to Eric, but shout out to our partners. We have many near and far, and this just wouldn't have been possible without them.
Cool, my glasses. Where's that thing? So you want to use the same presentation? Okay, so let's. Okay. So Haley was more of the technical side, and I'm kind of the boots on the ground side. I figured that everybody kind of had a good idea about prescribed fire and kind of how it works. So what I wanted to do is kind of focus in on some of the challenges and aspects, the differences that we have at Letterkenny to deal with prescribed fire that you may not experience. Brief history of Letterkenny. Letterkenny was originally established in 1942 as an ordnance depot. Basically, the government came in and took 350 parcels and said, sell it to us or we're taking it. And they took most of it. And over the years, originally it was 21,000 acres, and over the years through sale and excess land use, it's down to 18,287 acres. So the picture on you guys left, that is from 1938 aerial photograph from Penn Pilot. And the red lines are roads that were existing in 1938. You can see all the agriculture. And on the right, you can see basically what Letterkenny looks like today. One of the things to take note is all those roads in there, they're all blacktop roads. So when we do prescribed fire, we have really nice fire lines to drive around most of the places. Letterkenny is separated, like Haley talked about a little bit. Letterkenny is separated into 3 distinct areas. Zone 1 is what's known as LEMIC, Letterkenny Munitions Center. There's 10 different areas in LEMIC, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. There's no I, J. I don't know, military must not like I or something. But then there's J. Zone 2, which is outside from the green to the red, which is mostly mountainous area and agricultural, is basically what we call between the fences, between the high fence and the low fence. But it is mostly wooded, mountainous, rocky side of the mountain. And then industrial area is just a small area down to the left, where most of the activity happens there on Letterkenny. So the goal of Letterkenny's prescribed fire is to create some suitable habitat for quail, basically primaries, create suitable quail habitat for quail that have been released and will be released in the future. The goal is to get prescribed fire in all areas, to control non-natives, reduce native invasives, reduce leaf litter, reduce logging debris, which there's a lot of, slash, and the other typical objectives that we all have. We're starting now to get to the point where we're expanding the prescribed fire program outside of the Bobwhite quail area. We're particularly looking at getting into zone 2, into that mountainous area, and doing some wooded burns. They have a lot of mature timber, lack of regeneration, areas that had been cut previously that have birch. So trying to expand that prescribed fire operations to zone 2 to get some done. And there is some regenerate shortleaf pine left in the area. Matt, there are 3 left. There's 2 or 3 shortleaf pines that we're trying to kind of babysit. One of them died here a couple years ago, and it's laying on the ground right now, but there still are some. Up on the mountain, there's some pitch pines, so we have that as well. So under the current prescribed fire plan, there's 12 compartments. You can see from the map, each one of these colored units is a compartment in what we call zone 1 or Letterkenny Munitions Center. Each one of those is in our prescribed fire plan. Currently, there is 180 small burn units in the burn plan. And there's more to come because we're always creating, especially with the quail, we're always adding new fire lines to separate those units into smaller areas so that we can burn in a mosaic effect or a patchwork quilt, so that we don't have large, like Haley said, that over 50 acres burned in one area. We can hop around and burn separate areas. And you guys will like this one. And keep in mind, this is mostly grass fields, some wooded areas. But currently in the current burn plan, there's 13,554 acres in the current burn plan. Game Commission guys, you'll probably remember, that would have been frowned upon a couple years ago. But believe it or not, John is the one that put all these acres in the unit. But it is good to have for some of the reasons I'll talk about here in the near future. Again, approximately 80% of the fire lines are blacktop road. All those red lines on this map are blacktop roads. So type 6 access is not an issue. We can get around there pretty quick. We actually have a tanker that we can drive as well for water supply. 95% of our fire lines are type 6 accessible, which is really, really nice to have. And the ones that aren't are typically disc fire lines. We run a disc through, we maintain 12-foot disc line to separate some of these lines out. We kind of, from a fire line standpoint, it's great to have, but for the quail as well, having that bare ground intermixed amongst the grass and the shrubs is kind of a side benefit of having those disc lines in the units. So if that map looks confusing to y'all, that's just the burn units. That's the burn units with the numbers. So when we're going to burn, and you can see some of those like K5A, 6A, the reason we do that is because of the quail. So we can separate those units out so that we don't have those large expanses. Believe me, when we first started down there, a lot of you guys have been to Letterkenny to help us burn. It was great. You could just light along one blacktop line, let it back in a little bit, light along the other one, and go to the next one. It was pretty easy. It's gotten a little more difficult trying to separate that out and figure which parcels we want to burn. Bobwhite quail area currently is 3,818 acres. Again, all of which is under plan, and that is 28% of our prescribed fire planned acres. Our goal is a 1 to 3 acre burn rotation. Or sorry, 1 to 3 year burn rotation. So on average, we should be burning 1,200 acres a year. We cannot, at this point, we can't get there because of several factors. One being lack of fuel. We were having a real good fall until DCNR and Game Commission shut us down because it was too dry. And the funny thing is this is the one place we could have burned when everything was shut down, because it was like, again, it's blacktop. It's not going anywhere. But that is our goal. There are several factors. In certain areas, we are in about a 2 to 3 year burn window or rotation. In other areas, it's 4 to 5. We're working on getting there. And this is my first attempt at making charts with Excel, so I apologize for it being backwards. You can see from 2017's on that side. We had 5 burn days. Our low is 2019. We had 2 burn days, and our high was 2020. We had 10 burn days. So burn days is difficult. We're hoping it's going to get a little better here in the very near future. And you can see our acreage totals. 2023 was our high at about 790 acres. And our goal is to increase both of those burn days, taking advantage of every opportunity we can. And I think we can now, or we're getting there shortly, and get those acres up over 1,000 acres. My goal is to be over 1,000 acres annually in the quail focus area, not including the other areas outside. So some challenges and obstacles that we have in the burn in Letterkenny Munition Centers. If I say limit, that's what I'm talking about, Letterkenny Munition Center. So prior to us burning, we have to submit approval, a request for approval through Letterkenny Munition Center through their safety office. If we want to burn in K area, we have to have a backup plan, K, G, B, because they may come the day of the burn and say, you can burn in B, but you can't burn in K because of their operations and how they're working. And depending on their daily mission, they may not know till the morning of. Some of you guys have maybe burned with us out there where it wasn't until 8 o'clock the day of the burn, we didn't find out that we could burn that day or where we could burn, which creates a whole separate issue. And in Lemmick, there's 901 munition storage bunkers. That's so the picture on the left here is the front of your munition storage bunker. There's 901 of those in Letterkenny, in Lemmick, that we have to deal with. And you can see all those little pink dots show up for everybody. Can y'all see them? That's all munition storage bunkers. So again, if we want to burn over here in K area, but they're delivering Patriot missiles that day, we may have to go to B area. So we have to plan ahead and have a backup plan of plan A, plan B, plan C, because we may not know till the day of where we can go, which creates another problem. Every one of those bunkers has to be protected during a prescribed fire. So the fronts of the bunkers have Where the doors are at, those round circles, those are vents. Those all have to be taped up. In the rear of the bunker is a vent. That has to be covered up. And each one of those within 100 feet, any one of them that may be within 100 feet of active prescribed fire has to be covered. So again, if you find out at 8 o'clock the morning of that you can burn in F area and the area you want to burn has 50 bunkers that need covered, you have to get out there. We have to get out there. Somebody has to get out there and cover the vents in the front and the vents on the top. So it gets to be, and before I was there, and I've burned there for years, but there have been times where Tyler and Matt and the crew has gone out and covered vents only to find out that morning that they can't burn. So it gets to be a tedious process. What's the most you've ever, 80? 80 of those igloos getting covered to get burned. So it gets to be a monotonous process, especially when you got 1 or 2 people doing the whole thing. Burning in the quail focus area, where birds have been released or where they will be released again. Typically those long linear features would be all one burn unit, but in the areas where the quail are at, we're putting fire lines, trying to separate things so you have a mosaic effect, trying to burn in separate areas. And again, like Haley said, this year our prescribed fire windows in the primary area is going to be shut down kind of May 15th-ish is kind of the date or April. I tried. So April 15th is going to be our cutoff date. And we all know that typically, in that end of March, beginning April timeframe, that's kind of our hot spot in that spring burn window. There are some areas we may be able to work some things out and do some other things, but we're kind of limited on our burn window in the quail area where our primary focus is. Some weather restrictions. One of the weird weather restrictions that I had to get used to when we first started burning in Letterkenny, and this is an Army regulation, within the compartments with earth covered magazines, which is those things that you need covered, controlled burns will not be conducted with a speed higher or less than a local ordinance. That's not relevant, or less than 5 miles an hour. So you have to have a minimum of 5 miles an hour to burn where those igloos are. And our mixing height is 1,800 feet. With a 5 mile an hour wind, you don't get much lift a lot of times. So it gets smoky real quick unless we can get a lot of heat, and especially in these areas where there's not a lot of fuel, where we can't get that heat to get the smoke up and out. But yeah, the 5 mile an hour thing is very important out there. There's a safety guy that drives around and checks everything we do. And he wants to know all that stuff. One of the other limiting factors in Letterkenny currently Letterkenny has four full-time employees or prescribed fire qualified. Craig's the firing boss. Matt Miller is a FFT1, and there's currently 2 FFT2s, Tyler and Sam, who both have task books open. And myself, who is a Quail Forever employee. Currently, I am an RXP2, but one of the strange things in Letterkenny is there is a agreement between Letterkenny and Pheasants Forever, Letterkenny and PGC and Pheasants Forever, PGC and Letterkenny, but there's no agreement between PGC and Letterkenny and Pheasants Forever. Now I'm confused. So at this point right now, nobody knows who's covered my liability as a burn boss. So we have to get Brian to come down, or one of the RXB2s, to burn the boss to burn. We're currently in the process of rewriting the plan and updating the plan to drop some things down. It does have in there, because it's a federal installation, they can burn with a CPBM. We're fortunate to have two individuals that went through the course. So Matt and Craig will be burn bossing hopefully here before long. Letterkenny is currently highly dependent on outside agencies. October 24th this year, we had a 12-man crew represented 5 agencies. We had myself and Patrick from Pheasants Forever. We had David Kavanaugh, is David here? Dave's here, and Stephen from Nature Conservants, oh, he's back there in the back. We had Game Commission and University of Delaware. So it was kind of nice to have all those different agencies working together. We had a lot of new people getting things together. So, and the other thing is lack of fuel. As Haley mentioned, there was a lot of tree mulching and tree harvest. There's a lot of rubus, which is great, but there's no fuel underneath of it at all. It's mulch. And when they mulched it, we all know how that mulch acts in fire. It just does not want to burn. Even on the driest days, it seems like it's hard to burn. So between 2017, the start of the project, 2,000 acres of overgrown forest invasives were treated and mulched and removed. And we're still dealing with that to this day. I was mulching yesterday in areas and there's no fuel in the ground. And every year we're currently remowing and remulching and trying to, Tyler's planted, I think about 100 acres of warm season grass just this past month. So, since 2017, Letterkenny's burned 3,500 acres. And again, we've been rewriting the prescribed fire plan to drop some of the complexity issues down so that we can drop that crew number down to 5 individuals on some of the low complexity burns. The big thing there is that we could go out and burn, if the Lemmick guys are out there working and we have 40 acres to burn, when they get off at 3:30, if it's a good day, we could be out there briefing at 3:30, ready to put fire on the ground at 4. The other big thing is we can go anywhere we want on Sundays. So we've actually did have a Sunday burn this year that was very successful. We were able to get a lot accomplished. So originally equipment was an issue with Letterkenny, but currently Letterkenny has 2 Type 7s, a Type 6 engine. They got a 1,200 gallon tanker truck, an old retired fire department truck, and 2 ATV and UTV torches, which on Letterkenny, you can imagine with all those blacktop roads, those ATV and UTV torches are invaluable because you can light a lot of fire really quick if the wind's right. So slowly getting up to par on where we need to be. And I have nothing else. Any questions for Haley? Not for me.